Thought I'd do a review of my Indain Chief Vintage. This is actually my second vintage. I bought my first one used back in 2017. In 2019 I upgraded to my Indian Roadmaster over there, but I very much missed having a vintage, so I thought maybe one day I'll buy another one. So I recently, back in the fall, about 4 months ago, I bought my second Indain Chief Vintage. I bought it used also. So I'm going to do a review on my vintage and also just talk about some of the changes they've made in the Indain Chief Vintage over the years. We'll just begin with the very front. All the vintages, I think except for the Dark Horse, come with the white wall tires. I would have even offered it in the white wall tires. But it comes with the full fender. I know everybody doesn't like the full fender, but for 2022, Indain only offers 2 motorcycles with the full fender. The Springfield, you can get full fender, open fender. Roadmaster, you can get full fendered, open fender, and everything else is all the open fender. I like the full fender. The open fender looks good too, but I like the full fender. It's definitely got that Indian look. Of course, the war bonnet on the front, the fat chrome fork tubes, as opposed to some kind of polished aluminum you will see on other brands. The big huge headlight, the light bar. That light bar puts out a tremendous amount of light. I leave it on day or night. Of course, at night people flash me thinking I have my brights on. Let's see, the vintage comes with this big massive windshield. Great wind protection with that windshield. It seems to me that the 20 and 21 vintage have a shorter windshield, but that may be my imagination. Let's see, it came with crash bars. This one came with the oil cooler. The newer ones, they did away with the oil cooler. I'm not sure why. I'll talk about the motor a little later, but you can tell it certainly has that nostalgic look. The big fat teardrop tank. The dash is on top of the tank where it should be. Wide handlebars. Of course, the real leather seats and saddlebags. Most of the vintages come with the tan leather like this, but there are some that came with the black leather. Of course, I forgot to mention, on the front of the fenders you've got chrome tips. Same thing on the back fender, you've got the chrome tips, just nice little extras. Let's see, the owner before me added the fancier floorboards. I added the fringe on the handlebars. Of course, one of my friends said, I wouldn't put fringe on a motorcycle. And I told him, of course not, you've got a Harley Davidson. But an Indian, the fringe came on the seat and the saddlebags. The fringe just really looks good. Let's see, I added the passenger backrest, also have the luggage rack. Previous owner before me added the pipes. They're CFR exhaust and sound really good. Now the chrome tips there, the chrome's peeling off. Previous owner also added the breather. So it really runs really good. Let me get my helmet on and I'll take you on a little ride and finish the review and talk a little bit more about some of the changes they've made in the Indain Chief Vintage. Now, one thing you notice when you ride this motorcycle, it is a big bike. It feels like a big bike. It rides like a big bike, but the strange thing is it really doesn't feel heavy. You don't feel the weight. It hugs the road on the freeway, and you've got all kinds of room on it, but again, oddly, it doesn't really feel heavy. So let's see, back in 2020 they changed the rake on the front end. The 2020 and the 2021 vintage, the rake matches that of the Springfield, the Chieftain, and the Roadmaster. So this one has got the longer rake, and where you really feel the difference is in a parking lot or really slow speed maneuvers. Sometimes it feels like it takes an acre to turn it around. In my big Roadmaster, which is bigger and heavier with the steeper rake, is much easier to do a U-turn. So that was one change that they made. Now at some point they added ride modes. Mine does not have the different ride modes, which is they say is a really nice feature. Somewhere along the way they added rear cylinder deactivation. This one that I own is a 15 model. It doesn't have that feature either. When they changed the rake on the front end, they also went to the air shock that you find on the Chieftain and the Roadmaster. So my Roadmaster suspension, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would give it a 10. This Vintage without the air shock, I'd still give it a 9. It is still a fantastic suspension. Way better than the last Harley Davidson I owned. I mean, there's no comparison between the suspension on this Indain Chief Vintage and on the 2019 Street Glide that I bought brand new. So the ride is really nice. You can tour on this bike. I have ridden it from southeast Texas up into Arkansas in a day, and coming home the same thing. So you can ride all day long, hundreds of miles on this bike if you want to. I mean, it may be viewed more as just a boulevard cruiser, but it's really much more than that. Let's see, the wide handlebars do put your hands out in the wind blast. So if it's cold outside, you know, you're going to feel it on your hands. The motor, I mentioned when I did the walk around that it has that classic look. But I love the motor. I love the torque. I mean, it'll get up and go. A much better motor than the Harley 103. Now, the Milwaukee 8 is pretty comparable to this Thunderstroke Indian motor. But up until they came out with the Milwaukee 8, I think the Indian definitely had a much better motor. And it's still, the personality is different. I mean, these are completely balanced. There's really literally no vibration at an idle. Of course, they took most of the vibration and the shake out of the Harleys, you know, when they came out with that Milwaukee 8. But the motor is fantastic on this motorcycle. Of course, we buy motorcycles for a number of reasons. One, of course, is style. We buy a particular motorcycle because we like the way it looks. I love the look of the Vintage. I don't think there's a better looking motorcycle on the road. It's gorgeous. And I've had, I think, 19 motorcycles and almost 50 years of riding. I'm going to tell you, this Vintage and the other Vintage I had get way more attention than any other motorcycle. My Indian Roadmaster would, come in second as far as an attention getter. So the style is there. Another reason we buy motorcycles is performance. This motorcycle performs extremely well. We buy motorcycles for features. I mean, this one, as I mentioned, a very nice suspension, a nice transmission, huge floorboards. I'm 6'1" with long legs, and I have plenty of room. I can move my feet all over the floorboards. I can put the heel of my foot on the front of the floorboard and completely stretch my legs out without highway pegs. So this motorcycle is extremely comfortable. It came with cruise control, which is really nice, especially on an all-day ride. Your wrists get tired, you can just set that cruise control for a little while and you're good to go. So I really like this motorcycle. My number one favorite motorcycle of all time is my Indian Roadmaster. But this bike, the Indain Chief Vintage, comes in an extremely close second for my favorite bike. It's just an incredible motorcycle. Now, you may have noticed on social media or the Indian website, for 2022, the Indain Chief Vintage is not listed. It appears to be gone. Now, some say it's the same bike as the Springfield after changing the rake and the rear shock. And there's some truth to that. It is almost the same bike. The only real difference would be the saddlebags. But when you put the seat with the leather fringe and the leather saddlebags with the fringe on the Vintage as opposed to the hard bag that's on the Springfield, it really changes the look. So I was very disappointed that Indian appears to have dropped the Vintage. I hope that one day they bring it back. It wouldn't be hard to do since it is basically the same motorcycle as the Springfield. You know, and offer it with the hard bags or the leather bags, either one. But I'm extremely happy with this motorcycle. It's a gorgeous bike. It performs extremely well. It's very comfortable. You can ride all day on it. So if you want a Vintage, don't hesitate to buy it, especially right now. You know, you can't buy a brand new one. So if you can find a used one at a good price, you may want to go ahead and get it. They're really amazing motorcycles. So that's kind of my thoughts on the Indain Chief Vintage. It's just an overall fantastic bike. All right, Samantha, what's the message you have?
Be sure to like this video and subscribe and comment.